Whether you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, or if you're watching us on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe and hit that notification bell.
Welcome to the Disruptive Dialogue, where we're elevating perspective and igniting change. My name is Thomas Cotton, and I'm your host. When I was growing up, I was taught a lot of things that didn't quite fit the outcome of life that I wanted to have. I never saw myself going to prison. I never saw myself being almost homeless. I never saw myself going through all the challenges I went through, but I still had to go through them. And as I started to recognize that a lot of the choices I was making, a lot of the information that I was receiving wasn't adding up to the places I wanted to be, I started to make a change in my life. I started trying to really undo all the information that I've ever gotten that didn't lead me to the place I wanted to be. Through this process, there's one thing that I started to see, that there were so many people around me that were going through different challenges in their life and having the same outcomes that I was having. Because they were given information, we thought this is the way the way we needed to live. And so we followed the script, and the script was leading us all down a path of destruction. And so there's something that I noticed, though. Even though we're going down this path of destruction, all we're trying to do is live. And as I started to recognize that all we're trying to do is live, I started looking around, and that's pretty much true for everybody. There are a lot of people who are just trying to live. They're just trying to get by. They're doing their best with what they have to just get by and live. And that's all I wanted to do at that point. I just wanted to live. I didn't have an idea that I would, come out and help people, or how I would help people. I just knew I needed to get myself right. And as I started getting myself right, I started recognizing that people would gravitate toward that because they wanted to understand, how do I get my life right? And I've been very fortunate. God has blessed me a lot with being able to document the process of transformation. And so the curriculum that I wrote was just basically giving people a basic foundation of how to live. And that was important because there's so many people who just want to live. But there's so many other challenges that keep people out of the space of just moving forward. There's systemic barriers, there's structural barriers, there's personal barriers that we face every single day that keep us in the same place, keep us in that rat race, keep us moving nowhere, doing a lot of activity but not going forward at all. There's a point where people think that they have to sacrifice their life for a cause that isn't going to benefit them, their family, their legacy. It's not going to benefit you at all. But they hold on to this cause as if this is the only truth there is in life. Now, I understand that mindset. It's not that I look at people who have this mindset of being stuck in structural and systemic barriers and personal barriers. I don't look at them and say, well, there's something wrong with them. I look at the systems that we're a part of and the things that have caused trauma in our life and the barriers for people to excel. And those are the reasons why I do what I do, because I know there are people out there who just need the support, they need the guidance to see a different way, to see an example, to find hope, and to get direction so that they can make the transformation they want to see in their life. So the tools that I use are available to a lot of people. First of all, I wrote the curriculum Rethink Life because there are the barriers that I talked about where people need to overcome personal and systemic and structural barriers. So they have to be able to see that there's a different perspective we have to have about our experiences, and our experiences just don't hold us back. Just because we have certain experiences in life doesn't mean that's the end of our life. We have to recognize that as we're walking through this life, we're learning. We're going to make mistakes. Things are going to happen to us. And if we end up in prison, that's not the end all. Even if a person gets a life sentence, some of my best mentors have been people with life sentences. People who recognize that, I did a lot of things in my life that led me to this space, but I may never get out, but I can help someone else make a difference. And so the people who sowed into my life and continue to help me to move forward, those are the people that I want to honor with what I do. So as I start looking at the tools that are used to transform life, it's people helping people is the first thing. You do life on life. We're not living life in silos. We live life together. So if we're living life together, then we have to recognize that people are going to be the first resource that we need to help people. We also have to learn to recognize that people that go through challenges or have been incarcerated or been in other situations are just people who made decisions, and those decisions ended up in a certain place. Doesn't necessarily make them bad people. There's a lot of circumstances and situations that people have to face in life to overcome, and they're doing the very best they can just to live. And I want to stress that point, that people are just trying to live. So when we start thinking about the resources that are used to help people, it's organizations. There are many organizations out there that are helping people transform their life. The problem is they feel like they're at odds with one another, that they have to compete. In this space, there is no need to compete with other organizations. And that's the reason why I started an organization. We're called Redemption and Advancement Alliance for a reason. It could have just stopped at redemption and advancement. Redemption means true redemption is from Jesus Christ. That's my belief. But I do know every life, as long as there's a heartbeat in a person, there's an opportunity for redemption. But the advancement part is that part where you don't just help them see a change, but you walk them through the change. Biblically, this would be like discipleship. But in life, people need people to help them walk through those changes. That's where coaching comes in. That's where mentoring comes in. Because a lot of times people can't see what options and opportunities are out there for them if they're coming from a space where this wasn't even a part of their life. If change and work and jobs and careers aren't a part of their initial life, and you know that this is something that they need to be able to change, then people have to be available. Organizations have to be available to walk people through this process. Wraparound services just don't happen from one organization. It happens from a collective of organizations that come together and recognize that the person is the most important part of the transformation. And then all these organizations have one thing in common. They're trying to help people live better. And every organization can add value to that process. It's not going to be one organization that's going to help a person elevate their life beyond the barriers that they face. It's going to be a collective of organizations that come together and they begin to move things forward. So those are some of the other tools we use. The other part is relationship. Relationship is one of the most important parts of the process. People want to know that they can be seen, not just for their negative things, but for the positive things that they bring. They want to know that they have something to contribute. They want to know that this process that they're going to go through is going to actually lead to a positive result. It's often hard for people to trust, but as we begin to walk through a process, people begin to trust. Let me just say this. Coming from where I come from and having this conversation with you all, there's a lot of barriers that had to be overcome. And I know that I'm blessed to be able to overcome those barriers. When I was growing up, there was a point where I didn't trust anybody. I wasn't sure I was even trustworthy. And so when you have a lot of these challenges and this trauma that happens to life, to people, it's hard to overcome those barriers just on your own. You have to get around people that you can now begin to trust. And as you're able to trust, then you're able to open up even more to the change and the transformation. But that's created through relationship. It's not created through a program. It's not created through just because you know you have to change. It's created through relationships. So a lot of times when we engage people through the organization, or if I engage someone individually, the most important part is just creating that relationship. Every tool that we have can be useful if there's a relationship with someone that a person who needs to change, they have that relationship with that person, they're more willing to trust. But we also have to recognize relationship goes both ways. That person that we're supporting also has something to offer. They have dignity also. They have things and experiences that they've been through that can help every single process. We can't come into a situation thinking that we're here to fix everybody. We have to come in realizing that we're here to create relationship, and we have tools that we're going to offer to them. And these tools and these other organizations and this network of organizations and people that we have to offer to you is available. But if the relationship isn't there, it's hard for people to trust that process. When I needed help, in the beginning, I didn't think I needed help. I thought it was all on me. I thought that my change and my transformation was all on me. Now, there's one part of that that is all on me. Everything that I've done in my life is my responsibility. So I couldn't put it off on anybody anymore. I couldn't say, the reason why I'm in the situation I'm in is because of my parents. There's a lot of decisions I made. My parents made their decisions, the people in my life made their decisions, and I made decisions. I listened to certain information. So the beginning of my transformation was to take full responsibility. In my upcoming book, which should be out, within the next 6 months or so, there's a part in there where I talk about surrender. And surrender was the biggest part of me saying, you know what, it's not anybody else, this is me. And as I began to surrender my life over to God and start to recognize that, yes, all this is my responsibility, my choices and everything else, I started to think that now I'm going to pull myself up by my bootstraps. I'm going to get myself out there and I'm going to do my stuff. I'm going to get it done. But as I started to look around, this is the rhetoric we hear from people. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Get yourself in order. Go learn something. Go do this. But I look around and I see most successful people, if not all successful people, never have done it by themselves. They've always had somebody who's been there. They've always had someone who helped guide them, give them information. It could have been early on in their life. It could have been later on in life. But no one ever gets to another level by themselves. So I start to recognize that this is not a process that you do by yourself. This is life on life. And so I didn't realize I needed help until I started recognizing that my ways weren't getting me beyond where I was at. Because a man left up to himself, a man left up to his own thoughts only thinks the same thoughts that he has already. So I had to start to expand my thoughts. I had to start to allow people to tell me things about myself so that I could see the pitfalls, because there's so many different things that I picked up over the years that were normal to me, but in life, they're not absolutely normal. These are things that I needed to overcome and barriers that I needed to recognize that I'm putting in my own life, because I was creating a lot of barriers just based on my mindset. And so one day, it all came to a head when I had a mentor. This mentor was a staff person at the last prison I was at. And I would go in, he would allow me to come into his office and talk to him once a week. And every time we come in, he would ask me certain questions. And then he would try to give me information. And I would block that information by saying, man, you don't know where I'm from. You don't know what I've been through. You don't know my life. And I would block that information every week. And then one week I came in And it's the same old thing. He's telling me some things and I'm trying to listen to him, but I'm like, man, you don't understand. That stuff don't work where I come from. That ain't the kind, and he cut me off. He's like, do you want to be successful? I said, yeah. Do you want to make changes in your life? Absolutely. Do you want to have a bank account you can smile at? Yes. Do you want to have a car? Yes. Do you want to have a house? Yes. Do you want to have a family? Yes. Do you want to travel? Yes. Do you want to be successful in business? Yes. He just kept asking me a series of questions. And I answered all his questions, and he said, well, I have all that. Why wouldn't you listen to me? And that began to break down the wall. I went back to my bunk that moment, and I said to myself, while I'm sitting there on the bunk, it's during count time, and I'm sitting there on the bunk just thinking about what just happened. And I came up with this conclusion. Is what he said to me is going to help me or is it going to hurt me? Well, if it is going to hurt me and could possibly help me, why wouldn't I listen to it? I don't want to be in this mess. I find myself in mess and still arguing with people who can help me out of my mess. I didn't want to be there. So I started taking that mindset. If it's not going to hurt me and it could possibly help me, what do I have to lose? That man helped me become a better man. He helped me recognize the strengths and everything that's been poured into me throughout my years, the good stuff. He helped me see life from a different perspective. He helped me to elevate my thinking to the point of transformation, and not only my transformation, but helping others to transform their lives also. So that's when I began the process of helping people transition out of prison, even while I was in prison. And so it's through the idea of, yeah, I had a lot of mess in my life. I didn't think I needed to change certain things. But when you're looking at your life and where you find yourself, sometimes you have to do a complete overhaul. And let me just throw this out there. Doing a complete overhaul, a lot of times people feel like I'm a sellout because I'm not keeping it real. But the reality is, what you go through and the hardships that you go through, those are real. And if you feel like that's keeping it real and that's where you need to be, right there is a thought and a process that you have to undo, because keeping it real and keeping your life in a space where it's going to continue to harm you, and that's real, that's the change that needs to begin right there. So trauma is one of those big issues within my communities that I grew up in, and communities just like that, underserved communities, ghetto communities, whatever you want to call them. There's so much trauma that's happened throughout the history of this country to these communities. We think that because civil rights happened 50 years ago that everybody should be okay, but the amount of trauma that's been dropped on these communities of color, it's one of those things that if it's not addressed correctly, we will self-perpetuate the harm that has been caused to us throughout generations and centuries. If we start to think about, if someone's trying to get themselves ahead and go to school and learn, and they're trying to read books and become smart, there's a certain group of people that will talk about that person as if they got something wrong with them. Like, trying to be smart is a problem. You know, that's what the slave owners used to do back in the days. They wouldn't allow people to read. They didn't want their slaves to be smart. They wanted to be dumb so they can be controlled. And when we start to think about this aspect of life, that's a trauma that is perpetuating throughout our communities. There's a lot of other traumas centered around social determinants of health that continue to perpetuate our communities. When we think of something like oral health and how oral health can keep people from being successful in school. So we heard of the school to prison pipeline. Well, think about this. Oral health, if a student can't be in school because they have mouth trauma or cavities, and they miss school, or they're not focused because they have all this pain in their mouth. Then they get to a certain point in third grade where they're not reading at grade level. And then that continues on in fourth grade because they have missed school or they haven't been focused. Now they're starting to enter the school to prison pipeline where they're not reading at grade level. Therefore, they're starting to be counted toward these numbers of inmates that will be there in the future. And again, it's not just the testing. There's so many other things that go along with that. But my point is there's certain traumas in our community because a lack of health care, a lack of care for the community, the way the community's set up, the way the people in the community respond to opportunities. So there's so many different traumas, and I'm going to do a whole other show when we talk about trauma. I'm going to bring people on who have a lot more understanding about trauma than I do. But I will say this, my own personal trauma and all the things that I had to suffer through life. If you ever heard of ACEs, look it up. It's Adverse Childhood Experiences. And it's a study that was done by the Kaiser Permanente Foundation, and it gives a score on how many different ACEs a person may have. And if you look at anybody coming from the neighborhood that I came from and raised in a family that's typically like the one I was raised in, your ACEs scores are off the charts. And if they're not addressed, then those are the reasons why people are willing to make decisions that can lead straight to death, that can lead straight to prison, or they can lead to just harming other people who look just like them. And so my focus on when it comes to trauma is to understand that everybody that I engage with has some type of trauma in life. And that can be a barrier for them to overcome a lot of the challenges and adversities that they've had in life so that they can actually live to their potential. So if these traumas are still present, then overcoming them and being successful can be a very hard thing to do. It's not impossible though. And then we have to recognize that people are resilient. People who've been through traumatic events and overcome them, they're very resilient. And when I start thinking about overcoming a lot of the obstacles and continue to have to fight for so much, those traumas are often the things that will get in the way and keep us in a certain space. So dealing with trauma, whether it's through a group setting, whether it's through counseling, whether it's through psychiatry, or if it's just really getting down on your knees and praying to God and letting God's word just go throughout your whole body and just trusting Him. Whatever it takes to get beyond that trauma is an important step toward moving forward. But I believe a lot of times what ends up tripping us up is we'll start moving forward and we'll have unaddressed trauma in our life. And even when we feel a little success coming, things tend to kind of move over and we end up tripping our own selves up because of that trauma. So every single day I have hope. Every day I wake up and I believe I'm going to see what God's going to do today. Because I truly believe God is the center of my world, center of everything. A lot of times, though, in life, I have this smile even when situations in life are going on. Recently, there's this 12-year-old boy who called the police in Mississippi, and police came and ended up shooting him. And a lot of times, I hear those things. And I keep pressing, Trayvon Martin situations, the different situations that we find I can name a whole bunch, of people and situations that we see on camera that really are hurtful situations in this world. And I keep pressing, and every day I wake up with a smile and I keep pressing. But it doesn't mean those things don't affect me. They affect me a lot. I was once asked, how come you're not angry about the situation, the Ahmaud Arbery situation is what I was being asked about, the George Floyd's. How come I don't get angry about those things and want to get out and just tear things up or protest and everything else? And my response to them and my response to you all right now is I'm always angry. There's not a moment where I'm not angry about the injustices that I see in this country. There's not a moment that I'm not angry about what I see going on in underserved communities and urban communities. There's not a moment that I'm not angry when opportunities aren't the same for everybody, when equity isn't there for our people. And these are the reasons why I continue to push every single day doing what I'm doing, because there's so many inequities that are still out there. Yes, there's opportunities, but if a person right now, we're coming out of prison and we think that getting them a job and that's all that they need is a job and they can change and they'll stay out of prison. If that's the thinking still, then that's a problem, because the way inflation has been over these last couple of years, you can get a person straight out of prison a $20 an hour job and they can't even afford to live. All we're doing is setting them up to fail again. So if we're looking at the person and we're saying, let's just get them a job, let's get them to a certain level of work, let's get them to a certain level of housing, then we're doing them an injustice. And so that kind of keeps me upset every single day. It keeps me angry every day, because these people, we need so much more. We need so much more for people coming out of jails and prisons, coming out of the military, coming out of poverty, coming out of homelessness. There's so much more that is necessary. And we got to quit looking at just getting people to a certain place and start looking at how do we help the person elevate themselves so they can be equipped to continue to grow in their careers, in their businesses, and other things, so they can keep up with the way this country is. They can afford to live, that they can not only survive, but begin to thrive in life and begin to show a different way of living. I think that's my driving force, but my smile every day is that I believe it's going to be possible. I believe all of this is possible. I believe that people have what's necessary and needed inside of them to get to those next levels. I believe that if people truly want that transformation, it's available for them. I believe that as they start to grow their life, yes, it's going to be a slow walk, but as they engage the process and they begin to work through their challenges, their traumas, the barriers and everything else, and they're supported, that they're going to get to those next levels. This past weekend, I had the pleasure of hanging out with one of the people who went through my class back in 2016. And we were talking about the jobs that he had that he got let go from, how, the jobs that he had no hope in, and just the way his situation was. And he just got a job that is paying him very well for a major car company in the accounting department, and how he trusted the process all the way through. Even though he didn't know that the outcome would be this, it took years for him to get here. I believe if we provide support and structure to people for years who are willing to walk out their process, to create a process, to move things forward, that yes, they'll overcome these things. So yes, my anger fuels my daily activity because I know it's possible. But my joy is that I know that God is able, and I know that people, when they do engage a process, the outcome will be so much better.